Hello again, and welcome to the second instalment of Northwood Golf Club's World of Whiskey with myself, Steve Gill. Thank you for those of you who've seen the first video we put up, and today's is really getting right into it and showing you what whiskey is all about. And today we've got two absolutely fantastic whiskies we're going to try, and I hope you enjoy seeing and hearing about them, and it encourages you to try a little of them yourselves. Thank you. And I've got two great examples for you here that I'm going to taste and talk a little bit about the enjoyment of tasting whiskey, but also about getting rid of a few myths, or somehow, you know, whiskey tasters belong to some secret society with a secret language. That's absolutely not what it's about. And I always encourage anybody when sharing a whiskey, or if it's their first time, is just to say, what do you taste? What can you smell? Does it remind you of anything? And particularly when you have such contrasts, which we've got here between these two, and then you can go backwards and forwards. One of the subjects we'll also touch on here is how to drink whiskey, and I've got a little jug of water here, and I'll explain a little bit about that and the impact on whiskey drinking as we do, and I'll also take the opportunity to talk about other ways you might like to enjoy your whiskey, and the eternal question of to ice or not to ice whiskey. So let's get on with it. And the first example I've got here is from a distillery we've already seen today in the session, and that's Lagavulin, which is a distillery on the Isle of Islay. Islay has a more predominance of distilleries in 1 square mile than any other part of Scotland, and any other part of the world actually for that matter. And Islay has its own classification of whiskey all itself because it's so famous, so prominent, so successful and so unique as well. So this is a Lagavulin. It's 16 years old, but it's called the Distiller's Edition. And what they do here is once every couple of years, the head distiller in the Lagavulin distillery, and this happens in other distilleries as well, will put together a special malt that they've taken from specific barrels to try and create a extra rich or an extra sensory experience with a whiskey, and that's exactly what they've done with this Lagavulin here. This is bottle 4 of 503 that were made in this batch. And the first thing I'm going to do is, as we said before, is shake the bottle. And why am I shaking the bottle? Mainly because the molecules in there have all bound and settled down from the last time I opened this bottle and had a drink. So it quietens down a lot of the flavours and also the aroma from the whiskey. So by shaking the bottle, I'm smashing those molecules together and breaking them apart, and they're going to release their aroma and their flavour. And we'll do something similar to that when we pour it into the glass. But what I'm going to do first, gently ease the cork out and have a nose of the whiskey. And no matter how many times you have an Islay malt, and particularly a Lagavulin, and particularly this one, it just knocks you for 6 from the sense of smell. I mean, it is utterly unique. And it's not just the peat that they use in the maltings that you get in there, but the Lagavulin distillery is right on the coastline in Islay, right on the sea. And so when the tide comes in, the actual, one of the walls of the distillery, when particularly where the barrels are kept as well, is a tidal wall. So the salt from the sea also is very, very apparent when you're at the distillery itself. And inevitably, for something sat around that wall for 16 years, it takes a little bit of the flavour on that as well. So what you get initially from smelling this is a whole lot of seaweed. And then also, quite common with Islay malts, yes, you get a little bit of peat. Not too strong actually, not like a Laphroaig, which a lot of people know, which are known as peat monsters, where that seems to overpower everything. But here you get seaweed, a brackishness, so that sort of colour of water that you see when you go to Scotland, so that rich colour that comes from the pine needles and the forest, and the salty air as well. So you're getting that in here. So I've shaken it up a bit. I'm going to pour a little measure, not too much. The sun is still up as well, so I have to be careful. There we go. And in doing so, I will tell you that this is a strength of, if you can find it, 43%. So it's not that strong, but this whiskey, this particular batch, was all about the flavour that the distiller wanted to get into the glass. Lovely rich colour in there as well. Much more colour in here than the classic 16-year-old Lagavulin you'd find in a supermarket, which looks a lot lighter. But that's because this has been spent some time, not all its time, but some of its time maturing over those 16 years in a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask. So hence you're getting a little bit of the colour. But not really heavily sherried. The distiller here wanted just to get a hint of it to complement the smell and the tastes that are coming through a classic Lagavulin. So, the moment of truth. I always like to put my hand over the top of the glass, and you'll see that again in a second with our second whiskey. And what I'm doing here again is I'm just breaking up again underneath my hand and releasing some of that aroma. And then, actually even more so, you get more of the sort of sherry sweetness coming through on this. So a combination. So I can't wait to find what it's like. You'd think there's a bit of a conflict between the peat and the sherry, but that's why Lagavulins like this are so brilliant and some of the most sought after whiskies, because they seem to do an amazing job. So, It's so, it does take your breath away. And it's, like I said, this is 43%, so it's not cask strength, but the power in this is amazing. And things you notice when you're tasting whiskey, the different tastes that you can get, just like any flavour, whether it be food or drink, will hit different parts of your mouth, from the inside of your cheeks and your tongue, different parts of your tongue. So on this one, the tip of my tongue, the back of my tongue on this as well, picking up the sweetness and the smokiness. Like I said, it's really powerful. And people will talk, just as they do with wine, about a finish. So first of all, in the mouth, the richness comes through and you can feel it wallowing and moving around your mouth. But it's almost impossible. You want to swallow it, you want to taste it. And then it's still rich. I can feel it now all the way down through into my stomach. It's a warmingness, it's not harshness that a lot of people associate with whiskey. It makes you want to go back for another sip as well. And something else you can notice on this is just on the side of the glass, there's what's called beading. And the beading is created by the oil that's come from the wood in the barrels in its time maturing. And so the stronger the oil content and the richness usually of a whiskey, the more beading you will get. And that's really interesting to see as well, just a particular observation. I've actually been to whiskey tastings with some fantastic individuals who are experts in their field. And I've seen people take some really oiled whiskies like Lagavulins and actually very gently pour water on the top. And of course, as the expression goes, oil and water don't mix. And you can actually sit water on top of a very potent Lagavulin before you actually move it around. So yes, overall, loads of sweetness, some smokiness, but more of the seaweed, as we said. It's rich, it's unctuous, it's absolutely delicious. Thoroughly recommend it. So, beautiful whiskey. So, what about water? Why is it something that you would have with whiskey or not, as the case may be? What does water actually do? Well, it's part of the same journey we talked about with the bottle itself and shaking up the molecules in the whiskey to combine the different flavours and aromas. And that's exactly what water then does as well. And it is amazing how much it can transform the experience of drinking whiskey. And I've done this with individuals, with friends, with family, and on tastings. And people think it is a bit of a myth, or you're just having them on, or it's something that they're not going to experience. It's too subtle to tell. But let me tell you, that's not the case, especially with something like this. So just a little water, not very much, probably about a quarter of what's in the glass there. Instantly, it slightly changes colour. And you can see as well, just in there, that the mixture between it, like you're putting two different liquids together, there's a coming together on that, almost like a whirlpool effect. Again, I'm going to move it around to make sure the water really gets going and within the whiskey. And now, from the memory of what I smelt before when it was just straight from the bottle, Now, actually, I pick up more of the peat and more of the sea smell and scent. So releasing that. And then the taste. Wow. Now that's different. That's hit the top of the roof of my mouth and just around the back of my mouth and around the gums to the rear there near my wisdom teeth. And it is much more mellow. It's smoother. And yes, you'd say it's slightly easier to drink as well. The richness has been toned down, but the smoothness of it now as well makes that quite lovely. And very gentle now as well, so incredible. So that's a Lagavulin Distiller's Edition. If you ever see one of these in the supermarkets, snap it up. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Now for something completely different. This is actually not a Scotch whisky at all. This is a bourbon. And this is a very famous bourbon. And some of the Kentucky distillers have been doing world-class whisky and bourbon as well. This I discovered in 2002. Again, this was in the Whisky Exchange. And you can see it's had a long life and just coming to the end, and lots of stories I've had with this whisky that I'll tell you another time. But the reason for this one to come out and to be treated very reverentially is because I wanted to show you this. This is something that everybody is grasping for right now, understandably. And some would say you're probably paying as much for this as you are for one of these bottles of whisky at the moment. So the very infamous hand sanitizer alcohol gel. And the reason I'm showing you this is because at the top it says 62.5% alcohol. So that is the rate at which the scientists will tell you that that becomes something that kills the bacteria and hopefully the viruses as well. Now the reason that's interesting is when we have a look at these two bottles, and this is a slightly younger version that I got a couple of years ago. You'll just see here, they actually handwrite on the label. The alcohol content in this is 72.5%, which is, you'd think is ridiculous, and you would think it makes it completely undrinkable. So we're going to find out. Obviously, you can make the association with this, that from a certain president's suggestion and advice last week about injecting disinfectant, don't do it. You'd be better off buying one of these bottles. It'll have an even better effect and taste even better. So this is a Stag bourbon, 72%, different glass, but again, shake it around. This has spent a long time in bourbon casks and also with sherries and the spirits they're using over there in Kentucky. Whoa. Yeah, that's really interesting. So just a little tipple on this one. Don't need very much. This, as you may have heard the expression with American whiskey and bourbon, this is definitely a sipping whiskey. That's all we need to appreciate this. So just a little. This is a whiskey tasting glass. This is sort of a classic whiskey tasting glass that allows the whiskey in the bottom to flow around and then it funnels the aromas up the glass. And again, from what we were saying just now with the Lagavulin, there is a whopping beading going on the side of the glass. It's sticking almost to the side of the glass here. And what do we get from this after we've shaken it and then we smell? Oh. It's unsurprisingly, the alcohol is already beginning to evaporate. So you get a real punch in your schnozzer with this, but there's completely different fragrances than the Lagavulin. And in here, you're getting very rich sort of toffee coming through, but with some sort of orange fruit coming through as well. So that's a little bit sharp on the nose, but together it's harmonious, it's lovely. Now, with this whiskey, you drink it slightly differently. Because of the exceptional alcohol content here, you actually don't need to swallow this whiskey. It's an amazing sensation because your body heat, when you take it into your mouth, and I'm getting it now as well, there's a real spice coming through even just from the glass itself. Take it into your mouth and then just let it sit on your tongue, in your mouth, for about 15 to 20 seconds. And you don't need to swallow it because it will have evaporated. It is absolutely amazing. So let's go for it.
Whoa. Oh, yeah. That is so enjoyable. If it wasn't for the alcohol content, you'd want to cook with this and make puddings out of this as well, with the syrup and the sauce that went with it, because it is absolutely amazing. This one has just wrapped itself around my tongue. Like I said, from the nose where I said the citrus and the sharpness that I smelt, actually there's much more richness of the caramel sort of wrapping itself around you. But it's really, really beautiful to drink, exceptional. But that's almost as much as I can handle. And actually, because of the way I like to drink it, I just choose not to put a water with this. But that's as much as I would drink in one night. Would just be that little one. 2 or 3 sips available, and that's it. This has just filled the whole of my chest cavity with warmth, and I can taste it as well. And obviously, if you were sitting next to me and I'd had a few of these, you'd probably think he's been on the bottle all day. But no, it's just that powerful, but very, very pleasant as well. So again, amazing whiskey. Excuse me. So yeah, there's 2 for you, that hopefully you get a bit more of an idea about how to enjoy a whiskey. And the last thing I'll say on that, 2 great whiskies. Try out yourself from whiskies that Neville has behind his bar. He also loves his whiskey. And we often have conversations, and he has some great ones there as well. And he likes his flavours, to get him to suggest a couple that you could try with your friends and just experiment and let me know what you think.
So there you go. 2 absolutely stonking whiskies, 2 world-class drams, taken apart and enjoyed with as many senses as we possibly can. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and there are a few more up my sleeve. Including the next one I'd love to do is whiskey being paired with food, which is amazing and takes whiskey to another level completely. Just to say as we sign off, love to help Adam's Captain's Charity, as we've said before. If you've enjoyed what we've shared today, please do make a donation, small donation, a £5, whatever it is, to the Captain's Charity, directly through the Northwood Golf Club account. If you have the details, fantastic. Just mark any donation charity whiskey and we'll know where it's to go to. If you don't have the details, just get in touch with the office and I'm sure they'll help you out. So thanks again for your time. Take care. Sanjivar.